From the latest on Caribbean cruises to kosher safaris, pilgrimages to Jewish Eastern Europe, and award-winning wines and international cuisine in sun-drenched Tel Aviv. Sit back and enjoy the trip with the travel edition of the Jerusalem Post podcast. Mark, I don't remember what you look like.
Ugly.
It's a good place to end the podcast, isn't it?
Thank you very much. We'll see you in the next.
It's been a long time since I've seen you.
It has. Probably when we came home from Bucharest. When was that?
I don't know.
It's more than a month ago.
But also the last couple of times that we travelled together, one of us was sick, one of us had a birthday party.
Do you know it's over 6 months since we went on the same flight together on the way to one of our podcasts?
Seriously?
Yeah.
Thought I've enjoyed the last 6 months.
That's why I was sad to come home.
Lots of extra arm room and leg room around me, been able to spread out a bit. Talking of 6 months, etc., etc., next podcast we'll be celebrating 2 years.
Wow, that long?
That long. And our last podcast, which we didn't actually really celebrate on air, was our 50th.
But we celebrated it in Bucharest.
With lots and lots of alcohol, good cheer, and hopefully what you enjoyed as a wonderful podcast. Which brings us on to this episode.
Where are we going this week?
Well, we're sitting here, but our guests will be taking us around the world, actually to 4 places, even though we've only got 2 guests. Which one do you want to talk about first, guest 1 or guest 2?
The one with the most destinations.
Okay, so that comes first. We're going to be finding out from our expert guest where the top 3 destinations are around the world for vegan travel. So do you want to hazard a guess before we hear from her?
Well, I would say Tel Aviv because we did a vegan food tour of Tel Aviv.
Okay, you've got to go with the country. I think that's what we set. We set her the task of 3 countries that are vegan friendly.
England.
Okay, interesting. I would have thought that pork and a good old British breakfast would put pay to that.
India.
Yeah, that's a good one. Got to be somewhere else, maybe Nepal.
Or California.
Do you know what? Considering how politically correct and so on parts of America can be, the States, it is for me as a vegetarian and somebody who sort of does a bit of kosher stuff, it's incredibly difficult for me to find a decent vegetarian restaurant in many parts of the United States.
It's probably easier to find kosher than vegetarian in a lot of cities.
I think that's absolutely the case, but as I'm vegetarian, that doesn't overly help me. But yeah, to find a good vegetarian option in many restaurants across the States is surprisingly difficult.
God will forgive you if you eat meat in a kosher restaurant.
Food, of course, will play a very big part in any destination, and that certainly is the case with regard to guest number 2 today.
And this isn't an American state, this is a whole country. The country of Georgia.
Georgia.
No, not that one.
You're cutting me off in my prime.
Home of Jimmy Carter.
Actually, no, because we're talking about Georgia over in the... I was going to say in the Middle East, but it's one of those strange places.
Caucuses.
Yeah, Caucasus. Is it Caucasus?
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe he had a holiday home in Georgia.
Who, Jimmy Carter?
Yeah.
Which Georgia?
Oh, you've lost me. I need a quiz just to get my mind back on track.
Yeah, in case you've forgotten what we do at this point, we give you 1 or 2 quiz questions. And because we've got 2 guests, it's 2 quiz questions this day. I'll do question number 1. The daily meal named Tel Aviv the top destination for vegans. To the nearest 10, how many vegan and vegan-friendly restaurants does the city have, according to this internet site?
What's vegan friendly? They don't tut when you say I'm a vegan.
I'm assuming in this particular case it's talking about milchik, chalavi, dairy places, of which, of course, there are a plethora throughout Israel because of kosher laws.
Milky is not vegan.
Yeah, but vegan-friendly, so that they'll get the idea. If they're already going to be semi-vegetarian, then they're going to presumably provide a fair number of dishes that are good for vegans and cooked in a non-meat environment, which, of course, is important.
Question number 2. Tbilisi is the capital of Georgia, not Atlanta. The name Tbilisi derives from Old Georgian, but what does the name mean?
How do you pronounce that name?
Georgia.
No, the other one.
Tbilisi.
Well, I have a theory that you might be wrong, but we'll put that to our guest later in the podcast. And at the end of the podcast, you'll hear the answers to these couple of questions.
It's not a theory. It's a name that's not in English. I am wrong. David, that is a very good muffin.
Thank you very much indeed.
What have you got in that muffin?
I'm trying to remember if the muffin is vegan. Does it have an egg in it? I might have one egg. So it looks chocolatey.
It tastes chocolatey and banana-y.
It's only cocoa. There's no chocolate in it. 3 bananas. I used half what the recipe called for in terms of sugar. I used 1/4 cup of sugar.
Wrong size cup.
Yeah. I can't remember what else I put in. I really don't remember.
So if you were going to make that vegan, what would you do differently?
Well, here's a very interesting thing. I can't remember if we've talked about this on a previous episode. We should actually have a sort of cooking spot where you and I bring a few recipes forth. But something I've learned of late is if you take flaxseed and water and mix them, and I think it's 2.5 teaspoons of flax to 1 teaspoon of water, or it might be the other way around, so forgive me for that, and you leave it for 5-10 minutes, it makes an egg substitute, and it really is very, very good.
Or chickpea juice, I believe.
You can also use chickpea, yeah.
What's the word for it? Aquafaba? Aquavelva? No.
No, aquafaba.
Aquafaba.
What's aquavelva?
Isn't that like some sort of aftershave?
Oh, God, let's get on with the show. So, yeah, we've got to introduce our guest.
We're going to talk to Bridie Reed, who is the co-founder of World Vegan Travel, and find out, do vegans travel differently?
Vegans like to travel just like non-vegans like to travel. Sometimes being vegan can have some challenges, but also some extra benefits as well. Like it can actually be really nice to travel as a vegan. So when vegan travelers are traveling, they would love to, if at all possible, and this is where vegan group travel can come in. It's really nice to be able to eat really, really well without a huge amount of effort. Food is a considerate part of the big reason why we travel, because we like to sample food, and vegans might miss out on certain culinary traditions because they're traditionally not vegan. So it's really nice to be able to travel and enjoy those culinary traditions. And also there are a lot of activities that vegans might not be interested in when they travel, like, for example, elephant riding in certain places in Southeast Asia, or visiting leather tanneries. These are the kinds of things that vegans would not be interested in checking out. It's kind of a little bit of niche travel area because vegans have particular needs that non-vegan travelers might not care so much about.
I remember when I started traveling a long, long time ago, there were certain places you went and you said, can I have a vegetarian this or a vegan that? And it would come, but as a treat for you, they would sprinkle meat on top of it because everybody wants meat.
Mark's very, very old.
I don't look it, but I am. Can you travel the world now as a vegan, or there's still places that just don't bother going to?
You can travel pretty much anywhere as a vegan. It's true that your culinary experience might not be the absolute best, but then there are places where the culinary traditions aren't particularly interesting for non-vegans as well. And this assumption that we only travel for food is, I think false. We travel for so many reasons. There might be some places like Mongolia, for example, that is a very meat-heavy traditional diet, but I am sure that you could go there for a few days and not starve. And, you might not have the most balanced diet. It might not be the most varied and delicious diet, but that's usually not the reason that most people would go to Mongolia anyway. So there's plenty of reasons that you could really enjoy a place like that and, just maybe not have the most interesting food options.
A lot of vegans, and maybe you're going to laugh and say, no, this is an absolute generalization, are going to be environmentally aware, let's put it that way. And people who come from the environmental camp often look at, say, long distance travel as a bit of a no-no. You try to source food locally, etc. We're not looking to expand our carbon footprint overly. You travel to some really interesting far-off destinations. How do you kind of balance or justify or whatever? This is the difficult question.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's something that I struggle with, and vegans that love to travel struggle with. And as somebody who is quite a frequent traveler for my business, for my work, and it's definitely something that we should consider. And I wish technology would move a little bit more quickly, but sadly it's not. And it's true that there are some vegans that are very environmentally conscious that might decide to eschew travel or offset their travel or do different things to make it a little bit more sustainable. But then there's the benefits of travel as well, in terms of, it can be extremely life-changing, and it can be inspiring. It can give us so much joy. And, there are so many things that are inherent to who we are as people, whether it's, having children or traveling or all of these things that not the most sustainable things to do, but we make the choice to do them anyway. I guess it's hard to reconcile, really. It's just a passion of mine, but it's obviously not brilliant for the environment. I acknowledge that.
If I am right, and you'll immediately tell me if I'm wrong, that your company, when you're creating travel packages, World Vegan Travel, you do include an element of volunteering or an element of being in a place where you can contribute locally, which is another way of offsetting that guilty conscience, as it were.
Yeah, I don't know whether it offsets the carbon footprint of travel, but our trips, we run group travel, and it's usually a little bit more sort of luxurious. There might be a little bit of an element of volunteering, but there's not a huge amount. Honestly, there are some other great vegan group tour companies that do more of that, and that's great. But we do try to always include elements of like learning about animal protection or visiting sanctuaries or shelters, and of course giving them a nice chunky donation along the way, if at all possible. I think every single trip we do, like for example, we were just in Rwanda, and of course, as well as seeing the gorillas, which is an incredibly once-in-a-lifetime experience, a huge amount of that gorilla fee, which is $1,500, goes to the local community. And also we invited one of the gorilla doctors to give a talk to our group. That was really, really fascinating. They do very interesting work, and also like other members of the public who were doing interesting things in animal protection. And it's not just animal protection, like we're interested in humans and as well. So, we always try to make sure that there are these kinds of elements in our trips as well.
I started being a little bit negative and saying, where wouldn't you go as a vegan? Can you name 3 places that you would go as a vegan? And then we'll go through each one and have a quick look at it.
Okay, I have 3 places that I chose for different reasons: Italy, Thailand, and Switzerland.
Okay, so one at a time. Italy is absolutely a fave of mine, so let's start there.
Central and southern Italian food is very vegan friendly. It's very vegetable focused. In fact, I have been told that Italians eat the most vegetables per capita than any other nationality in the world. As a result, vegetables are a very big focus of a dish. On top of that, when you go into a restaurant and you look at the menu, it's very often clearly written almost exactly what's in that pasta dish or in that pizza dish or whatever it is. So it's very easy to identify what is vegan and what's not, and what you can just leave off. It's never going to sort of have hidden cheese in there. And also as well, Italian food is incredible. It's one of the best cuisines in the world, in my opinion. And they have tons and tons of vegan restaurants as well, and a really booming vegan scene. So that's why I would nominate Italy.
Thailand. I haven't been to Thailand. I think of Thailand as 2 things. One is mountains and coasts, and the other is Bangkok. And I think of Bangkok as being somewhat, let's say, non-vegan friendly. I'll put it that way.
Thailand practices Buddhism, and that doesn't necessarily make it very vegan friendly, but a lot of Thai Buddhists, particularly certain sects of Buddhism, they will go vegan for 10 days a year, depending on the lunar calendar, and sometimes like once a month as well. And it's usually for religious reasons, sort of like for purification reasons. And it's called ginjai, to eat vegan, well, vegetables is what they call. And they also, in this time, because it is very distracting for them when they're trying to meditate and these kinds of things. They also avoid pungent vegetables like onions and garlic. So all of that to say, this is something that they have been doing for a long period of time. So not only is this very, very well understood, but it's also very much respected as well. So that, you know, if you say to a Thai person, Ginjay, I eat this way, it's not vegan. Jay is not a translation of the word vegan, but that everyone knows what that means, and it means eating vegan. And everyone is very, very respectful and supportive, and they will try to accommodate you. And Thai food is very easy to veganize, even when you're eating street food, as long as you make a few substitutions. And of course, Thailand is the home of amazing tofu, an incredible range of fruits and vegetables. It's just absolutely delicious. And Thai people, they really, really enjoy, they're very innovative, and they catch on to trends, and vegan is quite trending in the past few years. So as a result, there are just a slew of vegan restaurants. They even have like little hole-in-the-wall restaurants for these people who like to eat vegetarian all the time. There is a certain sect of Thai Buddhists that eat vegan all of the time, and they'll have these little hole-in-the-wall restaurants. You can get a great plate of food for like $2. It's great.
The idealized impression of Switzerland is a mountain with a cow in the scene with a bell on it. And when you think Switzerland and things you put in your mouth, it's chocolate, it's cheese. So why on earth?
Okay, so I chose this destination exactly for the reasons that you stated, because cheese is such a big part of their diet and these images that come to mind. But because Switzerland loves cheese so much, and they use it so much in their cuisine, fondue, raclette, for example, there are some innovators who are creating incredible vegan versions of these products and restaurants that are serving them. So you can go to Zurich and you can have, there's this company called New Roots Creamery, and they have incredible raclette cheeses. That's a new product of theirs, and fondue as well. And there's also quite a few other cheese companies in Switzerland that aren't very well known outside of that part of Europe. And they are very, very delicious and definitely worth heading there for. And yeah, it's super fun. And I will say that you can buy so many amazing products just in any supermarket in Switzerland these days. So it's great.
Moving away from David's stereotyped view of Bangkok, if you had to pick one of those three, which one would it be?
Oh, tough one. Thailand, I think. Yeah, I lived there for 10 years. I haven't been there since before the pandemic, and I have not had really good Thai food since I left. So I want to go there like right now.
I've been once before, but I went to Patong, but I've not been to Bangkok to see what David obviously wants to see, whatever that is.
It's a great city. It's a great country. It's really fun.
How can people get details about World Vegan Travel? How can they get hold of you?
Oh, thank you for asking. So they can look on our website, worldvegantravel.com, and they can sign up for our mailing list, and they will get some emails telling them all about us. We're on World Vegan Travel on all of the social media handles. And we actually also have a travel podcast. Of course, this is a vegan-focused podcast, and we talk with people, vegans who were interested in travel, people in the vegan travel space, and organizations that are protecting human and non-human animals in destinations that people might be visiting. So yeah, I produce a weekly episode.
Bridie Reed of World Vegan Travel, thank you for coming on our show.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
You're listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition, and here's a roundup of the latest travel news. Delta Airlines was the most punctual airline in the United States in 2022, while Iberia took first place in Europe. But the most punctual airline in the world is Azul Brazilian Airlines. It had an 89% punctuality rate across 280,000 flights. El Al came in 9th place in the Middle East and Africa at just under 70%. For this ranking, punctuality is defined as within 15 minutes of the advertised flight time. As to the least timely, Air Canada picks up the booby prize in North America.
Some 2.6 million visitors entered Israel in 2022, according to figures just out from the Tourism Ministry. The sector is still recovering after the COVID hiatus, with numbers down as much as 40% on their pre-COVID levels. On the other hand, it was a bumpy year for domestic tourism, with more than 20 million nights in accommodation bringing in almost $5 billion. Meanwhile, outgoing tourism has recovered more quickly than incoming tourism. Israelis made 8.4 million trips abroad in 2022, compared with 9.2 in 2019.
Direct flights from Tel Aviv to the South Korean capital Seoul have been relaunched. Korean Air will operate flights every week on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, shuttling passengers between Ben Gurion Airport and Incheon International.
For the first time, the United Nations World Tourism Organization named an Israeli village in its list of tourist villages. That designation goes to Kfar Kama, a Circassian community near the Sea of Galilee. The Circassians trace their roots back to the northern Caucasus region. The award aims to promote the role of tourism in safeguarding rural villages, their landscapes, natural and cultural diversity, knowledge systems and local values and activities, including gastronomy.
And we'll finish the news with a couple of stories from Berlin. If you happen to be in the German capital in the next few months, you may want to take in a new exhibition at the Jewish Museum Berlin. Paris Magnétique is dedicated to Jewish artists of the School of Paris. Some 120 works, including paintings by Marc Chagall, Amedeo Modigliani, Hannah Orloff, Sonia Delaunay and Jacques Lipschitz.
And you can hear us at the Jewish Museum in Berlin in our Berlin podcast. If you heard our Prague podcast, you'll remember the groundbreaking Manifesto Market. Now, entrepreneur Martin Barry is opening Europe's largest food hub in Berlin's Potsdamer Platz. Manifesto Market Berlin will offer 22 cuisines from Europe, Latin America and Southeast Asia, as well as 4 bars and an extensive entertainment and cultural program. It will feature a 2-story beer tower containing 10 large beer tanks. Cheers!
Forget the crystal, but it's the contents of this wine glass that's very good.
Is it cupcake?
So this is a Cru Class Provence wine. It's kosher. Despite it being kosher, it is extremely good.
Oof. Harsh.
It is a really nice wine. Now, this is a French white. But where are the roots of French wine?
In a vineyard.
In a vineyard where?
France, being French wine?
Well, it depends if you're talking about, say, a bottle that's 3-4 years old or a bottle that's as much as 8,000 years old.
That'll cost a couple of quid at an auction.
It might be a bit vinegary. But if you go back through the history of wine, many of the experts will tell you that wine didn't originate in Italy or France or Spain, but considerably east of there, as you said earlier, in the Caucasus, in Georgia.
Not Atlanta.
Not Atlanta, Georgia. My wife studied at Atlanta, Georgia. Okay, it was my wife's turn to get a mention after yours got a mention in a couple of podcasts ago.
I'm glad you had that on your mind.
Oh
dear.
Gosh, let's hear from our guest. Our guest this time is head of the Convention and Exhibition Bureau of Georgia, Levin Japaridze, and we had a conversation with him all about Georgia, but began by asking him how easy it is to get to Georgia from Israel, Europe and North America.
In 2022, starting from January, including September, 155,000 Israeli travelers came to my country, to Georgia. So basically, it's extremely easy for you or for anyone else to come visit my country, and Tel Aviv to Tbilisi and back. There are plenty of direct flights operated by Georgian Airways, Israel, El Al, and Arkia. In total, there are weekly 18 flights coming from the above mentioned airlines. There are also an easy and short flights to Batumi, the seaside resort of Georgia. From Europe, we have more than 32 direct flights, starting from the low-cost airports, finishing to the Star Alliance air carriers. And we are extremely well connected. And our main transportation hub is in Istanbul. And from Istanbul to Tbilisi, the flight duration is only 1 hour, 45 minutes, and daily we have 6 flights back and forth. Regarding the North America, we are not connecting directly yet, but there are big plans on that case as well. And I hope in near future we will have the direct flights with the US.
Let's get on to the more touristy side of things. Let's learn a bit more about the country. First question, how do you pronounce the name of your capital? Because I've heard it so many ways.
And usual Georgian would say it's Tbilisi.
So the T and the B go together with no I in between.
Exactly. It's not Tbilisi, it's Tbilisi.
Let's talk about Tbilisi. Is it a modern, ancient? Is it fast-paced, slow? What will people find there?
Tbilisi is a very, very old city. It's modern. It's historic as well. It's also a bustling, a spiritual. I mean, one can imagine doing everything in Tbilisi. Starting from the architecture, since Georgia was on a Silk Road, many nations and cultures and people were crossing it. All these people were leaving something behind, either in maybe in a cultural way or architecture or in cuisine as well. Tbilisi, wherever you go, I mean, it's a combination of the European and the Asian architecture. It's amazingly beautiful. You might have seen the pictures as well. The city is very alive. We are a four-season destination. There is always something to do in any period of year. Nightlife as well. Before COVID, Tbilisi was even, compared to the Berlin for the teenagers and people who like to go out in the club. We have our own cultural music festivals.
Let's go to one specific group, which are Jewish people. There's a long, long tradition and heritage and presence of Jewish people in the country. Of course, there's a large Georgian Jewish diaspora, many people here in Israel. But what can people sample of that today when they're visiting the country?
It's thought that the first Jews arrived in Western Georgia in the 6th century, which at the time was ruled by the Byzantine Empire. It was 15 centuries ago. It's a crazy time. There were up to 500,000 Jews living in Georgia, but during 1970s, there was a mass immigration. People couldn't stand the Soviet Union. Many Jews went to Israel. Maybe 17% of all Jewish people in the Soviet period, they moved to Israel. Now Tbilisi has a Jewish population. It's up to 10,000. In Tbilisi, we have in the center of the city, there is a huge Georgian synagogue. And also we have 2 Ashkenazi synagogues in Tbilisi as well.
You mentioned the history of the Jewish community in Georgia. There is a modern Israeli community that seems to come to Georgia and to Batumi quite a lot. What's the attraction of Batumi?
The pearl of the Black Sea, this is how we call it. So first of all, I could say the green nature. The second is the affordability. If you compare it to the other European seaside resorts, it is easily accessible. Last but not least, cuisine, attitude, and my favorite, biggest and strongest point is the safety.
I absolutely love khachapuri, which for those people that don't know is a pastry with egg and cheese in the middle of it. Certainly the version I like. Can you tell us something about the food scene in Georgia? What food can people expect when they come?
We have more versions of khachapuri as well. There are at least 4 which I have now on my mind. And basically in every region in a different way. There are lots of meat dishes in Georgia because we love meat. We use lamb, we use beef, we use pork, we use poultry, obviously. We are very strongly dependent on the vegetables and spices. Due to the Silk Road, Georgia was exchanging the spices and culinary things throughout the whole Asia and Europe.
Georgian wine has an extremely good reputation. Tell us a little bit about that.
8,000 years ago, Georgia has the tradition of winemaking. Also, the process of winemaking has become an intangible heritage of UNESCO. It is believed throughout the Society of Scientists and Europe and any other country that Georgia was the cradle of wine. The seeds which were found in the archaeological sites prove that Georgia was the first ever wine producing country. There are more than 400 grape varieties in Georgia, and now you can imagine how many wine varieties you could do.
We've talked about the Pearl of the Black Sea. We've talked about the capital. What else?
As you know, Georgia is a very small country. So basically, from one end to another, you could like cross it in, let's say, 7 hours by car. On this small amount of land, I don't know how it happened, but we have 5 skiing resorts. We have like a desert, like high peak alpine mountains up to 5,000 meters. And we have the highest settlement in Europe. And we have like huge, vast forests. We have also a subtropical gardens. And oh gosh, I mean, there are plenty of things I can talk about. But the main and crazy thing is that, for example, if you come to Tbilisi, you could ski in a Gudauri, one of the Georgia's best skiing resorts, and it will take you only 1 hour and 15 minutes to drive up there. Or you could go to a desert, same 1 hour and a half to drive to a desert and see the. You can go to the wine region in just 1 hour, maximum 2 hours. You're gonna be there. So you finished a meeting in Tbilisi or something. You like took a car, and in 2 hours you will be having dinner in the middle of the vineyard. You could stop in Kutaisi and see the footprints of dinosaurs and huge underground caves, like 11 kilometers with stalactites and stalagmites.
It sounds like there's a lot to do in Georgia. We're not going to fit it all into this interview. How do people get in contact and book a trip to Georgia to see everything there is to do?
When you are a solo traveler, you should go on a booking.com and then eDreams and buy your ticket and those. If you want to organize an event, if you want to like take a group incentive or do anything, basically, luckily there is a Convention and Exhibition Bureau of Georgia. It is a one-stop shop answering all your questions. It's not a tourist information center, but if you want to organize, let's say, a huge group of incentive, you don't know where to take your colleagues or people, you don't know like which hotel to choose, you just contact us, the Convention and Exhibition Bureau of Georgia. What you're gonna get absolutely free of charge is the recommendations, our recommendations on how we think your event should look like.
What's your website?
It's gceb.com. You can find us on Facebook, you could find us on LinkedIn. Basically, we are online anywhere.
Levan, head of the Convention and Exhibition Bureau of Georgia, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was an amazing interview. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope your listeners will enjoy it as well.
This is the Jerusalem Post Podcast Travel Edition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at MarkDavidPod or mail us at markdavidpod@gmail.com. So when are we going to Atlanta?
You've not been to Atlanta, have you?
No.
It's actually a really, really lovely city. It is massive. When I was there 3 million people, but I believe it's grown considerably since then. Here's a quick Atlanta, Georgia story. I was on one of the main thoroughfares there. All the main streets are called Peachtree this or Peachtree that. And I was at a crosswalk in the middle of this major road. I was heading one way. There was a woman heading the other way. She just looked at me and said, "How are you, sir? I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day." And then she walked off and carried on with her life. And that 15-second interaction made my day. You don't know what to say because you think I should be arrested or she should.
No, I was just trying to care a little bit.
You and I were just in Uzbekistan. And what was the thing that both of us took away from that more than anything else?
A bad shoulder.
And
The warmth of the people.
the way they touch their hearts with an open palm. It makes a difference. And Levan's making the point that that's exactly the type of welcome that you get in Georgia and the Caucasus.
I can't disagree because the people I know from that region are all very, very friendly.
Time for some thank yous, Mark.
Oh, you're welcome, David.
All right, I'll do it then. Thanks so much to Bridie and to Levan for making this programme.
And thank you to the Jerusalem Post for hosting this programme.
Please, please, please sign up I don't actually know what that means, but it's what they say on all podcasts.
Yes, if you get your podcast from Google, from Spotify, from Apple, or from any other good podcast provider, click on that subscribe button, and then you're guaranteed to know when our new podcasts are out.
And as Mark usually says at this point, you can go back through our archive and listen to the dozens of shows about the scores of destinations that we've either visited or talked about on the podcast. Do drop us a line, give us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you. markdavidpod@gmail.com, or you can drop a few comments off with your own podcast provider.
Quiz. It's quiz time.
Da-da-da-da-da-da. Da-da-da-da-da-da. I'm playing for time while I find the questions, which have disappeared.
You went past them.
Oh, there they are.
Those question things where it says questions.
Thank you. My wheel on my mouse was moving too quickly through the Word doc. Question number 1, we asked you. The Daily Meal named Tel Aviv the top destination for vegans. To the nearest 10, how many vegan and vegan-friendly restaurants does the city have according to this internet site? Do you want to have a guess, Mark?
Is it 10?
That's very near. The answer is a staggering, be a bit more realistic, Mark.
170.
400.
No.
It really is quite remarkable.
Tbilisi, now we've learned how to pronounce it, it's not Tbilisi. It's the capital of Georgia. The name Tbilisi derives from Old Georgian. What does that mean? Apparently it means warm place. Do you know why it's called warm place?
Don't know.
Apparently there are lots of warm sulfuric springs in and around Tbilisi.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. At this point, you'll be delighted to know
We're off.
we're going to say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.